Afternoon, everybody, or wherever you are in the world. I hope you're having a great day. We've got Riaan with us, and he was formerly a satanic church leader in South Africa. But since then, he has reformed, and we are going to get into all that. Before we do get into all that, huge thank you for coming on, man. And what was your life like growing up? Just so we could set the table as to what led to this decision to join the Satanic Church.
Sure. So I grew up in a very average, I want to say middle class type of family. Like most, I think, children in the 80s in South Africa did. We went to church every Sunday, went to Sunday school, all of that. And then I think what a lot of people don't know is that it wasn't just a decision or a choice one morning that I want to be a Satanist and join Satanism. There was quite a timeline of events and things that led up to that. So I grew up very much in a Christian church, in a Dutch Reformed environment. I even went over to an apostolic church straight after school. I basically want to say my last year of school. I went over to a more apostolic church, and I knew scripture very well, and I knew all the church lingo very well. So I thought also I had a relationship with God at that time, but I can definitely say today I didn't. So I soon after that, this was in 2003, going into 2004, I started searching for deeper experiences, get to know what is the meaning of life and purpose, and if there is a God. That was kind of my mindset at the time. So initially my journey was into the New Age and esotericism and things like psychic readings and that type of thing. And I also eventually got into that as a professional practitioner. So from 2005, 2006, I was doing consultations as a psychic already. And subsequently, I also did some courses in healing, different forms of things like Reiki and crystal healing and things like that. And I got deeper and deeper involved into the occult. And also, I trained as a traditional healer, which is basically a shaman, and graduated in 2010, as a Sangoma in South Africa. So I did all of that first before I was introduced to Satanism.
Okay, so you said that you was raised as a Christian, did you say?
Yes.
Okay, and did you go like church every week?
Yes.
And how did you feel when you were in church as a young person in the 80s?
Well, it's something you did. You didn't really question it. We were raised in an environment that this is what the truth is, and you shouldn't question it. Questioning anything is actually was considered wrong and sinful. So even though you had all these questions, you weren't really allowed to ask it. And sadly, that is still today the case in many of those type of churches. If I'm going to call it the more staunch type of church environments, where you're not really allowed to ask questions or go to deeper levels and deeper understanding of God. It's almost frowned upon. So that was very much the environment that I grew up in, considering church or concerning church. But I can honestly say my childhood was a very happy childhood. So there wasn't anything traumatic that happened, in my childhood or anything like that. Because I think a lot of people assume if you get involved in Satanism as an adult, that somehow there's something in your childhood that was the cause of that, which is very different to something like generational Satanism, which is what people are born into. in our ministry today, we work with all sorts of different people from different backgrounds when it comes to Satanism. So there's a very big phenomenon in this country where people are also born into families where there is Satanism being practiced, and then from a young age they are exposed to that. So that was not the case with me at all.
So it sounds like you had a happy childhood then, no trauma. But, you know, year after year of going to church and not being able to get questions answered, don't you think that must have been frustrating for you and perhaps sowed the seeds of some kind of rebellion?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what I'm trying to bring across is that when I was 20, this was definitely before my 21st birthday, is when I actually started. Well, I came to a realization that my questions will not be answered in a church or by church leaders. So that is what actually led me to explore alternative things and go and search for a deeper connection with whatever God could be. Um, and that's how I ventured out of the Christian church at a young age.
So when you're venturing out of the Christian church, are you finding pressure from family or friends not to do so?
Are you talking about then?
Yes.
So yes, I did a lot of things in secret initially. So I didn't initially tell people close to me that this is what I'm doing and these are the questions I have, because you also don't want to be ostracized and judged. And see, this is where it's dangerous, because I also met a lot of people like that in the time when I was working as a psychic medium and a healer. So many Christians would actually come to me in that time and said that they have all these questions that the church can't answer for them. So that's why they were coming to me. So unfortunately, this is part of the church culture, and the problems we have in churches today is that people are scared to ask questions and people are scared to be ridiculed and judged, and therefore they go and seek answers elsewhere. And it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to go to our church leaders and ask these real questions, and church leaders should be open enough to say when they don't have the answer that I do not have the answer, but I'll find out, instead of just saying dismissingly, we're not going to talk about that. We're not supposed to ask those questions, because those were the answers that I used to get in those days.
Yeah, there's too much dogma in the world. So for years, you know, you've been steeped in a certain way of life, and you find yourself going in a completely new direction. Was that exciting for you?
So are you talking again about the time I left the
Yep.
church? Okay.
Yep.
So it was, I think, because there was a sense of massive deception, but I didn't know I was being deceived. So I had the sense that I'm now accessing or having access to real answers, things in the unseen world, so to speak, and that I can find truth in that. So there was a great sense of excitement then. And I think that's also what propelled me to do courses and almost become a disciple, if you want to call it that, or a student of all occult philosophy. And I read as many books as possible. I did so many courses at that time to get as much information as I could.
And how fast was your worldview changing while you were doing all that reading?
So I I had a sense at that time that there was a lot of information that was hidden from people, and for reason, and that I'm having, like the key to unlock that. So, and then also obviously when you start delving into those things and when you start attending those type of meetings and gatherings, you will meet fellow people or you'll meet other people that is in the same kind of on the same search. So your social circle also changes. And the types of conversations that you have with people also becomes very different. So that was, I think, the appeal of that, especially at the time. Yes.
So, in this new social circle, then, did you find that you had a much greater sense of community than you had previously with the church?
I wouldn't say so, because you see, in those type of environments, and I'm sure in any type of environment, though, there's a lot of jealousy and competition. So the moment I started practicing as a professional practitioner, there was a lot of jealousy, and it's something that I found to be very true in the occult, is that there's constant fighting, and the chase for position and to achieve certain things and to get to certain levels. And somehow people think that there's just a certain amount of position. So there's a constant competition amongst each other.
Right. So there was a lot of rivalry then, by
Yes.
the sounds of things. And how did you handle that competitive threat?
So you see, now this is where and why a lot of people learn witchcraft skills and they start cursing each other and doing bindings on each other. So that is the reality of that world that a lot of people won't tell you. And especially before you join any type of, if you want to call it an order, a magical order, or a coven, or a group of people, or a society. It's also known as societies. Sorry. So this is one of the things that they won't actually tell you when you're about to join. You'll get a sense of that there is community and that people will, look out for you. But I can definitely say today and testify to that people who actually sat around my table and had dinners with me, and people who I helped when I was involved in the occult and Satanism, literally turned against me overnight. And that's the reality. So people who actually were, if you want to call it fellowship or in covens and grottos with you, will literally turn against you overnight the moment you leave, and you get threatened, and they will attempt to curse you, and they will slander your name as much as possible. And those are the things that, like I said, people don't tell you before you get involved. And that is also part of the reason why we are involved in this ministry, to actually talk about the realities of what happens in the occult and in Satanism, the things that people won't tell you before you get involved. And it's also similar with when a person gets involved in Satanism, for instance, they will not tell you, and you will not know initially, that you're going to have to do certain things, because in the philosophy and the intellectual part, and the, if you want to call it, the academics of the occult and Satanism, nobody will tell you that. And certainly I was also one of the people when I was at the leadership of a satanic organization that would tell the public that there is no such thing as certain things that we might talk about today or not, depends if we have time. But there was a point made to actually whitewash the practices of the occult and of Satanism. So if you want to call it good PR for it. And yeah, that's part of the deception. And my point is just that if you are open, about what it is you do, and if you actually tell people when you recruit them into organizations that this is what you're going to have to do, I don't necessarily see a problem with it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't see a problem if you are open about it and you tell people this is what you're going to do. Because why does there have to be the deception? Why don't you openly say this is what is going on and this is what you're going to be involved in? And if that was the case, I certainly wouldn't have a problem. And every person has free will and the right to choose for themselves. But there's a huge difference between that and deceiving people into joining and recruiting them into a movement and an organization without being open about what is going to be expected of you.
Okay, let's just go over the timeline then a little bit, just so that the viewers have got everything in perspective. So, I'm just going to recap for the people watching. So, you were with a conventional Christian church growing up, and you got frustrated because it seemed that there was too much dogma, things weren't being answered, and you sought a different path. And in the beginning, you said that you became a healer. Is that correct?
Yes. So my initial walk down the path of the occult was through the New Age. So those are things like I said psychic readings and crystal healing, Reiki, and that led to going deeper and deeper into it. So if you, for instance, would have asked me in 2005 when I started on that path, would you ever be interested in Satanism or joining Satanism or reading about it? I would have said absolutely not. So although I was already involved with demonic doctrine and the sphere of the enemy, I still thought at that time it's love and light and it's about helping people, like most people in those industry. They actually think they are helping people and that they're busy with good work, like I thought I was at the time as well. So that was my initial path. So I had 15 years of working as a professional in the occult before I actually got introduced to Satanism.
And how old were you when you began that 15 years?
So I was, what was that? I have to actually think now, because we are in 2025, so that was 2005. So I was 24.
Okay, and you mentioned demonic doctrine. Could you explain what that means, please?
Absolutely. So in the spirit world, there's only two things that really exists, and it's the kingdom of God, which is Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and there's everything else outside of that. So demonic doctrine is when you are under deception. So I believed at that time that I was communicating with people's spirit guides and I was communicating with people's loved ones on the other side, and I saw all these beings and people. And when I got saved 3 years ago and I started having a very close relationship with God after going through deliverance, I saw that all those beings were familiar spirits, which is demonic. So that is what I mean with demonic doctrine.
Okay, so during that 15 years then, what were the biggest ups and downs for you before you got into this, founded the Satanic Church?
So to be honest, if I look at it from a material point of view, obviously I made a lot of money during that time. So I was one of the most successful in terms of business, full-time practitioners in South Africa when I did that. There's quite a lot of people in South Africa who practice the occult and who practice things like, work in the holistic industry, but they don't necessarily do it full-time or run businesses in it. So I got to run my own business and I was very successful at the time. So that to me at that time was, if you want to call it a high. I think the lows were the constant being drained and not having energy, and again not realizing why I was so tired all the time. And also there was absolute no boundaries in terms of what people want to take from you. So you do not necessarily keep business hours, and people are constantly at your front door, whether it being your home or your business, looking for help and assistance. So you have no sense of peace. So I definitely didn't have any sense of peace or personal time. Your life is completely, or my life was completely dedicated to the occult. It's something that I did from the moment I opened my eyes until I went to bed. So that wasn't necessarily a pleasant experience, but I always kind of balanced it out in my mind with, because of the money that I was making, because of that.
So at that point in time then, what were the most esoteric requests you were receiving?
I would say all the spell work and rituals and witchcraft that I practiced. So that would range from various things. So I had clients who would come to me to resolve court cases, for instance. I had people coming to me with marital issues. I even had Christian leaders at that time who came to me to ask if I can help them to fill their churches so that they can make more money. So all sorts of things. I mean, it really ranges. And I think, I don't know if this is necessarily the appropriate time to mention it, but for context, what we have to understand about South Africa is that 72% of our government, of the people who sit in parliament, who make the laws in this country, go to traditional healers first. So that means before they go to a doctor or a GP or a psychologist, they will go to their witch doctor. So those are the people who are making the laws in our country. Our constitution is the only constitution in the world that allows for animal sacrifice as a religious practice. So because of our laws around religious freedom, it is completely legal for anybody to sacrifice an animal for religious purposes. And that happens in Islam, it happens in the occult, and it happens in Satanism. And obviously a lot in the African traditional sense and what traditional healers does. So that created a landscape in our country where people can get away with a lot of things.
Which animals are chosen and what is the ritual?
There's various ones. So obviously in African traditional healing, we're looking mostly at chickens and goats. That's kind of the preferred ones. In Islam, it's usually cattle, and then there's also goats. And then in the occult and Satanism, there's a range of different animals, depending on the type of ritual you are doing and depending on the level or the hierarchy within Satanism that you want to climb, that will determine what type of animal you'll have to sacrifice.
And when the animal is sacrificed, is the blood used in a particular manner?
Yes. So I think something that a lot of people don't understand, and this is something I get asked quite often when I go and speak at churches, is why is there blood sacrifices? Now, what we have to understand is that blood is a currency in the spirit world, and it's a life force. So if you want to make agreements and negotiations and deals and bargains with the demonic, that's why you have to bring blood, and that is why there is blood sacrifices. And depending on the type of ritual that you are performing and for what purpose, that will determine the type of blood sacrifice that you need to bring. And sometimes it's as simple as your own blood that you have to draw for certain rituals. Sometimes it's certain animals of certain colors and certain sizes. So it's all determined by what you want the outcome to be.
So when you say sometimes it has to be your own blood, do you mean the person who approaches you has to use their blood, or you have to use your blood?
No. So a lot of times in the occult and Satanism, you as the practitioner have to cut yourself and spill blood on a pentagram or sign your blood on a paper or draw sigils or veves or symbols with your blood on an altar. So that's usually your own blood. And then in covens, and from my experience in the occult and Satanism, in covens, you usually drink other people's blood that is with you and that is practicing witchcraft with you, where each practitioner or witch or warlock will draw off their own blood, and then that blood is put together collectively in a chalice or a cup, and it's passed around in a circle. So it depends whether it's a ceremony or it depends if it's a ritual. But yeah.
So what you're describing then, have you gone beyond the 15 years now and you've entered into the Satanism part of the story? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe then what at the end of that 15 years made you cross over?
Sure. So in 2017, whilst I was running my witchcraft shop and my psychic practice, I had a specific client that came to me after his wife and girlfriend have been to me, and he then wanted to see me as well for a consultation, and he asked me after the consultation if I have read the Satanic Bible. So I said no. And then he asked me if I would be interested. So the very next day, he dropped off a copy of the Satanic Bible and a cup of coffee for me. And I then read the Satanic Bible for the first time. So when he came to see me again, which was about 3 months after that, he asked me then, what did you think of the Satanic Bible? And I said, well, I think I am a Satanist, because everything that is described in the Satanic Bible, I resonated with it at that time. And I think we also need to understand that the Satanic Bible is written in such a way that it will appeal to people who feel like outcasts or they do not belong in general society, and that there's a reason for that, and they're actually supposed to be leaders, and they are supposed to be the goats instead of the sheep, etc., etc., etc. So that is why it appeals to so many people. And it also it kind of cultivates a philosophy that is about getting everything out of life that you want, especially the physical world, where you are your own God to be worshipped, etc., etc. So then I told him that I very much resonated with it and the philosophy, and he invited me to come and meet other Satanists at a social gathering. So that is towards the end of 2017 where I got to meet other Satanists in South Africa, and I was extremely surprised and blown away to see the type of people that was involved in Satanism, and obviously still today is, because I had this perception, like many people do, that Satanists are young people who dress a certain way and they all have tattoos and they are just rebellious and go and spray paint a bridge and things like that. And it was actually not that at all. It was extremely successful people. It is well-known people on television, in the media. It is people at the head of corporations, people in the medical field, people in the school system, in universities, etc. So I think that almost appealed to me more, the idea that this could be the people that I'm going to be hanging around with if I decide to take that step and be initiated into Satanism. So after a few months of connecting with them and going to social events, I then went to my very first Satanic ritual, where I was initiated into Satanism. So that was in 2018. And at that time, South Africa didn't have an official building yet for Satanism. So many of the Satanists were involved with Freemasonry. And my very first Satanic ritual was then at a Freemason lodge. And during my time at the South African Satanic Church, I've seen many people, many Freemasons come to Satanic rituals, and vice versa. Do you want me to continue with the timeline, or is there a question?
Yeah, I've got several questions backed up right now, Riaan. So let's slow it down a bit. We've got plenty of time. Going back to the initial social gathering with the Satanists then, before the ritual. I
Yes.
imagine at that social gathering, everybody just looked normal and there was no satanic paraphernalia. Is that correct? People, you know, the public would not be able to ascertain these people were Satanists at that point.
If you would meet these people in day-to-day life, absolutely not. You wouldn't be able to tell. At satanic parties or satanic social